Landlords, it's Ernie Garcia, your landlord attorney, and today we're talking all about your evaluation of brand new tenants and why you need a tenant scorecard. Let's get started. So what I've come up with is a tool that you can use and you can modify to your own tastes. It's a way to evaluate tenants that you can use in order to maintain a consistent and fair observation of all the tenants that come through and seek to rent out property from you. This way, if you're ever hit with some kind of claim that you are unfairly evaluating your tenants and denying someone in violation of federal law, you can point to the notes that you have on your scorecard to establish how fairly and how evenly you are evaluating each of your tenants. So to start, the very first one on my list is a criteria for credit history. And you're going to see that on my list are a number of criteria. You might want fewer of these, you may want more, and how you evaluate is totally up to you. Do you use stars? Do you go on a 1 to 5 system? In mine, I'm looking for a perfect score is 100 points. And I doubt that any tenant is going to get there. But for credit history, I've allotted 15 points for that. You could do it differently, however you want, whichever segment of your evaluation you believe should have the highest number, that's totally up to you. On my card, I've got credit history as 15 points, and perfect credit would get 15. And so it's up to you how you want to gauge the number of points your tenant is going to earn based on their credit score. You can determine that in any way that you'd like and apportion points in any way that you'd like. But what I'd like for you to consider is if I tally up all of these categories and I get to a certain number, what is that certain number that I will definitely accept, and what is that certain number where I will definitely reject a tenant? I would make my criteria based on that and weigh more heavily the things that I value and weigh more lightly the things that are nice if you can get them, but not absolutely essential. The next on my list is rental history. Does your tenant have a history of being evicted? Do they have a history at all? Is this their very first rental? And if it is, you have to ask yourself how valuable the rental history for this particular tenant is. Is the fact that they've never rented from anyone before a plus or a minus in your book? Is the fact that they were once evicted 10 years ago even going to register on your scorecard? These are things that you can evaluate, and for each criteria you can have subcategories for which you designate a specific number of points. Next is employment, and I give 10 points for perfect employment history. And what's that going to look like for you? Well, it could be a matter of 10 or more years at the same job is perfect employment history in your book. Maybe it has to do with the amount of money that the prospective tenant can prove that they earn every single month. Can you confirm employment? And can you confirm the amount and the position and the length of time? All of these are important factors that build a perfect score on someone's work history. Next is criminal history. Now, some people are going to think different things about how important a person's criminal history is, but you have to decide what things are non-starters. What would get you a 0 under criminal history? Is some accusation of theft as important as a conviction of theft? And you may weigh the two very differently. Is the fact that someone once committed a crime in 1978 going to matter to you? It may or may not, depending on the crime and depending on your own opinion about that crime and the people who commit those crimes. But it's important that if you're going to use criminal history, that you do a criminal background check so that you can, for yourself, determine, I do want this person even though they've done X. Or I definitely will never take a person who's guilty of Y. totally up to you. Come up with it and put it on your scorecard any way you would like. Landlords, I hope you have found today's video absolutely essential for the way you evaluate your tenants from this point forward. What does your tenant scorecard look like? For more information just like this, please follow us on Instagram, join our Facebook group, and if you enjoy this content, give us a like. And if you're not yet a subscriber, please consider subscribing. Thanks. The next consideration for us is their pets. How many pets do they have? What kind of pets do they have? What are the sizes and breeds of the pets that are going to be in your home? Is this a pet at all? Is it an emotional support animal, or perhaps a seeing eye dog? Is this the kind of animal that you find suitable due to the size or due to the medical history of the animal? Have they had all their shots? Can the owner produce a shot record? Can they show that they care for their pet as well as can reasonably be expected? Or is this just some guard dog that they've got outside that could potentially pose a threat to you or to your neighbors? All of these make up what your evaluation happens to be when it comes to pets. Have in your mind or on your list specific criteria for the pets that you will allow and the pets you won't allow, whether you allow pets at all. You can evaluate your prospective tenants based on these very simple rules that you've established before anyone's even applied. This next one, I think it's a pretty big one. Is your prospective tenant able to pay the full first month's rent and a full deposit at the start? You may have a 0 to 10 or a 0 to 15 or a 0 to 20 gauge for this one, and either they can or they can't. And if someone absolutely cannot, it's a big mark against them. I think that the fact that they cannot pay a full month's rent and a full deposit at the beginning should be a pretty big red flag for you and should really cause you to reconsider whether or not this is a good fit. But the ability to pay that first month and a full deposit should be something that you mark as one of the criteria for coming in and establishing their residency in your rent house. Next, does the prospective tenant have any references? Are there people who can vouch for them, people who've known them for years? Maybe it's a current or former employer. Maybe it's a former landlord who has really nice things to say about this particular tenant. If a person has 0 references, you have to determine whether or not you're willing to trust someone who has absolutely nobody to say anything good about them. Does your prospective tenant have a savings or a checking account? Why is this important? Well, you're going to find that people who don't have savings and checking accounts are going to be probably less trustworthy with regard to their finances. There's a reason why some people just don't do it. Now, there is a trend away from conventional accounts, but you can say, well, my preference is that someone maintain a conventional banking account of some sort, savings or a checking. Why is this also important? Well, it may come down the line that you're going to have to file a lawsuit against this particular tenant. And if you know their banking information, you're going to be in a better position to recover your judgment from them in the future. If you're able to seize accounts from a future or prospective tenant in some future litigation, it's going to be because you know precisely where they do their banking and you know their precise account. By knowing these things, you put yourself in a better position. In the hopefully unlikely event that you have to file a lawsuit, you'll be able to recover any damages that you might have from a valid savings or checking account. Finally, the last criteria on my list, which doesn't have to be the last criteria on yours, but the one on mine has to do with a photo ID. Does your tenant have a photo ID issued by the current state? Now, you may have somebody who's moving in from out of state. You can get their currently valid photo ID, but you should make it a criteria and a requirement that because they are now living in the state of Texas, they should update you and give you a current photo ID. Why is this important? Well, like with the previous one, you may ultimately have to go after this tenant in some future litigation, but you also want to be able to properly identify who is living in your home. You don't want the only identification you have for your tenant to be some out-of-state ID that's no longer valid. And so you're going to decide just how weighty this particular issue is, as you are for all of the criteria on this list. You know, I've got so many of these, you know, exactly the same point value, but you may not feel the same way. And then you're going to add up each of the scores that you get once you've made your determination what this prospective tenant has earned. And you're going to decide, is this someone who makes the cut? Do you have very strict criteria and you want only the best possible candidate to stay in your rent house? Then make sure it's reflected here in your scorecard. Are you a little more lax and you think, well, as long as I hit these minimum expectations, I'm going to be just fine? Totally up to you. But if you have a fair way of determining who fits best in your rent house, again, you're going to spare yourself a lot of headache. But also, by having a criteria, you're going to find better tenants. And I hope you found this absolutely helpful. Come up with your own scorecard. I'm going to put a link in the description to this scorecard, but don't hesitate to modify it to suit you and what works out best for you. If you're interested in additional information from us, as always, there's going to be a video here that you can check out. But until next time, happy leasing.